Hello guys and welcome to another video. So I recently asked you guys to submit your Percy Jackson and popular opinions and you guys did so with a vengeance. So today we're gathered here to roast them. And by we of course I mean me. And by them obviously I mean you. I'm gonna roast you. So with further ado, let's move on to your unpopular opinions because some of them should just stay in your head. Shouldn't be said out loud. You guys roast me all the time. So I guess I'm just perpetuating the cycle of roasting, which isn't great, but it's also not the worst, so let's go. Unpopular opinion number 1. Clarisse is an underrated character and people forget how powerful she is. I hate to admit it, but I feel like you might have the right idea. So while Clarisse is one of the most prominent characters in the first Percy Jackson series, she is often forgotten after getting to the Heroes of Olympus, since there we get so many other powerful demigods. We have 7 powerful protagonists, and we kind of forget a lot about the other campers who were side characters during Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Add to this the fact that in the 7, we already have someone who is the son of Mars, who is the Roman equivalent of Ares. So that means we have a new character who is super powerful, so powerful that he is destined to be in the Prophecy of the 7, who on top of that can shapeshift into any animal, real or not real, and who has books written from his point of view, which is already a lot in the Percy Jackson universe. So you add all those things up and then you compare them to Clarisse, who is a side character who is relevant in one book and then who just appears sporadically. You're like, okay, yeah, I get why people forget about her because she was there and then she wasn't, but everyone else was so much in your face, it was easy to forget her. But she is very powerful, and let's not forget that Clarisse was an integral part to winning the Battle of Manhattan. Where would we have been if she had not defeated the dragon? So while it saddens me to say this, I guess your unpopular opinion is correct. And I do believe that this is an unpopular opinion just because people either do not like Clarisse as a character because she is a bully at first, or just because people have forgotten her in favor of more flashier and more important characters. Because let's not forget, Clarisse is a side character who is relevant in book 2, canon relevant in book 4, and relevant in book 5. In book 5, and for the most part you kind of despise her at first because she's not willing to cooperate. Obviously she pulled through at the end because she's our girl. But moving on, unpopular opinion number 2. Rachel Elizabeth Dare is actually an amazing character, one of the best actually. It's unfair to judge her based on a crush on Percy. Half the fandom had one too, LOL. That is all very true. No, actually it isn't, but the last part is very true. Half the fandom, I feel like, is putting it mildly, I'm gonna say 80% of the fandom, because while half the fandom might be dudes, I feel like Percy has turned a lot of people. And honestly, I had a crush on Percy, and I'm Arrow Ace. I raise you that. So while yes, you're right, having a crush on Percy is partly what makes a lot of people dislike Rachel, because if you oppose Percabeth, then you deserve death, you know? That's just the way of the toxic shipper mind. However, for me, I have never particularly liked Rachel. I'm okay with her now, and I like her from Heroes of Olympus onwards. However, every time I reread the Percy Jackson the Olympians books, I'm like, she is just a little bit too much. She is too forward, and she's kind of a lot. She's very abrasive and impulsive, and I'm not about that life. And I say this coming from a very introverted perspective, because the fact that Rachel just demands all the time from people she barely knows and she has no qualms about it, it rubs me the wrong way, because that's exactly the opposite of who I am as a person. So for me, it's a matter of our personalities just not meshing well, I feel like, initially. Because I know I could be friends with her eventually, but she just starts off too strong for my liking, and that's where my dislike of her begins. Her and I's personality just does not go well together, at least initially, because she's a lot, and I'm very introverted, so I never come off as that much, you know. It might be something I have to work on. Generally, I just don't like her. She came on too strong, okay? She was a lot. It's not to say she's a bad person, it's just not the kind of personality that I gravitate towards. And that's fine. That's why books have more than one character. So there's a character for each kind of person out there, you know? And it's okay to dislike Rachel. It's okay to like her. That's why we're human beings, and that's why we have different opinions. But in terms of different opinions, yours is wrong. Rachel sucks. Unpopular opinion number 3. Hazel is a really interesting and underrated character. Now this is an interesting opinion because while I think Hazel probably is underrated, I don't think she's all that interesting. Her backstory is interesting, but I feel like I'm missing a little bit of her character for her by herself to be more interesting, because I feel like a lot of characters are interesting and they have interesting backstories, but they would still be interesting without those backstories. Like if I didn't know their backstories, I would still find them a compelling character. So we have Percy and Annabeth, and I feel like Thalia and Nico are all characters that are very compelling regardless of if you know what's happened to them or not, how they got to that point or not. I feel like Hazel, you need to know her backstory to find her interesting, because she's not blonde, but she's more subdued than everyone else. So she's easy to overlook. Are there a lot of people like that in real life? Yes, there are. And I'm pretty sure we would be friends if she existed in real life. However, I'm looking for a little bit more pizzazz from my characters, so that's why she's never been my favorite. I just reread the Heroes of Olympus for a secret project I'm working on, so stay tuned for that. But she's still not one of my favorites. I liked her way more than I did originally, because before, every time I got to a Hazel or Frank chapter, I wanted to die. But this time around I was like, okay, the weakest part of Hazel for me is the fact that apparently she could control the mist. That came completely out of left field and she was able to control it perfectly in a couple of chapters, and the fact that she is with Frank. If we got those things out of the way, then I would be much happier with her as a character. Is she underrated? I think she's just rated well enough. Honestly, I think Jason, and I never thought these words would leave my mouth, is much more underrated than Hazel. God, who am I? Unpopular opinion number 4. Speaking of the devil, Jason is one of my favorite characters in the Percy Jackson universe. I can explain this with the quote that let me know how much I appreciated him. Everyone told me not to join the 5th cohort. They said it was the worst cohort in the Legion. So I said, fine, I'll make it the best. Joining the underdogs because you know how much more they need you. Top tier, I think about this line a lot. If you've been on my channel for X amount of time, you know I'm a Jason hater. And it saddens me to say that that is no longer the truth. Did you see that? Did you see that? That is no longer the truth. I am no longer a Jason hater. Like I said, I just recently reread the Heroes of Olympus, and honestly, every time Jason was there, I'm like, Jesus, I know how your story ends. This is making me so sad. But irregardless of me knowing what the future holds for him, I was like, he's not a bad character. Yes, I can see how he's much less flashy than Percy if you compare them, but Jason's a good guy and he's an interesting character, and that just, it made me so mad because I'm like, I've been disliking you for 10 years. I remember the first time I read the Heroes of Olympus, every time we got to a Jason chapter, I feel like that's the one that I disliked the most. Because I loved Leo, and I was, okay with Piper. But every time Jason came up, I was like, oh God, this white piece of bread is contributing absolutely nothing to my literary nutrition. So I was very mad at him for existing. And now I'm mad at Rick for doing what he did. But actually, I feel like this is better for my journey, because if I had liked Jason from the start and read the Trials of Apollo, liking him, that would have been so much harder for me. Which is fun, because I'm also rereading Trials of Apollo right now. I'm on book 2 and I know what happens in book 3, so wish me luck, because I might cry. Never thought I would cry for that man, but I'm this close. I know that is gonna fall off again, so you better keep an eye on it and tell me when it does. Okay, that's your job. You tell me if that falls off. My unpopular opinion, I don't know what number we're on by now. My unpopular opinion is that Jason could have landed on Calypso's island instead of Leo. Interesting, let's hear more. It would be the start of Jason's honoring the minor gods arc, because Jason decides to finish what Percy started while he's in Tartarus, and it would be better than the BOO scene from Blood of Olympus. I don't know why I said BOO. And Calypso could even maybe have a platonic friend. Also, Caleo's ship could still happen later on. This is very interesting. Thank you for your unpopular opinion. I feel like more than an unpopular opinion, this is headcanon, but I'll still take it. Should Jason have landed on Calypso's island instead of Leo? I feel like the story wouldn't change that much, besides, Caleo, but Jason doesn't really add anything to the story while on the Argo 2. Oh my god, wait, no. He adds the Nico scene. That's the only thing he does, because I was thinking of Hazel and the turtle, but he really was irrelevant there. That's the only thing he does besides Nico. So, okay, you got me there.
I give it to you. You got me there.
Right.
So,
and by you, I mean myself. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to say no, because it's crucial that Jason is with Nico in the Calypso. No. In the Cupid scene. I would be okay with anything else, but there he needs to be there. So I'm sorry, gonna have to say no, though I did like your headcanon for a while before I talked myself out of it. I'm sorry. You were this close. You were very close. Would I love Caleo to not have been canon until Trials of Apollo? Yes, I would have. My headcanon is that Leo should have landed there. They should have not liked each other at first. Then, begrudgingly, they should have become friends. And I think Calypso should have fallen for Leo, maybe. Leo shouldn't have fallen for her. Should have gotten off the island because Calypso was in love with him and that's the only thing that's needed. Leo, learning to love himself, does sacrifice himself for the world without doing it for his girlfriend, but for another friend that needs him. He goes back for Calypso, and then on their 6 months, while they're traveling, trying to get back to Half-Blood, they might fall in love. That would have been something that I could ship because Calypso would have been turned into a 16-year-old mortal then, so it wouldn't have been as weird, even though, you know, she would have lived for a long time, and Apollo even says that she's older than him. Regardless, I think that would have been the way to go. Unpopular opinion, Magnus Chase is better than Kane Chronicles. I have just reread Kane Chronicles. I am looking forward to my reread of Magnus Chase in a month when I finish Trials of Apollo. So it's not too fresh in my mind. However, I do remember liking it more. I remember, unfortunately, that the Kane Chronicles was my least favorite, even though as a whole, I think it's much more solid than Heroes of Olympus. Heroes of Olympus just has characters, moments, and quotes that just appeal more to me. In its highest highs, Heroes of Olympus is much better than the Kane Chronicles. Kane Chronicles, overall, much more solid storytelling. Unpopular opinion, surprising. There was no need for that many ships in the Heroes of Olympus. Like, the books would have been better without Piper and Jason, Hazel and Frank, and Leo and Calypso. Especially Leo remaining single would mean a lot of character development. Love your channel, by the way, thank you. Love you too. I completely agree with this. You know, if you follow me, then you know, I agree with this. It's not me being aromantic, okay? Because I really love ships. I'm a hardcore shipper of almost anything. So what you're saying here is that you're okay with Percabeth, obviously, but every other ship is like, no. You also didn't mention Solangelo, which aren't canon yet here, but they start being canon here. So I'm gonna take this as you're okay with Percy and Annabeth and Will and Nico. I'm sweating, girlies. Give me a sec. You haven't known true heat until you come to Madrid in the summer. And you're like, wow, it's not that warm, isn't it? You know what? People in Madrid don't typically or ever have air conditioning in their houses. So we are at 40 degrees Celsius without air conditioning in our houses. So, leave a like if you want me to survive and be able to pay for air conditioning to put in my house. If you don't leave a like right now, it's because you want me to die of heat stroke. You want to be responsible for my death? Also, there's currently construction going on right next to my house and right in front of my house. So if you can hear that, I'm sorry. I literally can do nothing to prevent that. So going back to the actual unpopular opinion, I do think that the Heroes of Olympus would have been much more interesting had there not been like shifts between every single main character. Because obviously Percy and Annabeth were going to be together. I feel like that's very interesting. However, my opinion will always be that Jason and Piper should not have gotten together at the end of The Lost Hero. It would have been such a more interesting ship if it had been slow burn all throughout the 5 books. Because that's what people love about Percabeth. It's slow burn, it takes 4 books for them to kiss and then 5 books for them to get together. That's incredible. Yes, give me more of that. But getting together after 1 book, and not even in that book but off screen, just is not giving. So that would be my plan for them if they had to be canon. I stick by what I said before about Calypso and Leo, and for me, Frank and Hazel would just never be a romantic pairing, and that would be the perfect Heroes of Olympus for me. Unpopular opinion, Thalia is the most badass character. Interesting, because a lot of people have forgotten her in favor of Jason Grace. Obviously, he is the flashiest of the Grace siblings, and he controls lightning much more often than Thalia does, but that's also because we've seen him much more than we've seen Thalia, and he can fly, you know, fly boy. Flying boy, Superman, all those things. However, I agree, Thalia is one of the most badass characters. She literally gave her life at 12 years old to save 2 of her friends. While she was battling a lot of monsters, she became a pine tree.
She fought valiantly, and she met a hero's fate.
She met a pinecone's fate.
And then she overcame the trauma of having become a pine tree. So I feel like that's pretty badass. Is she the most badass? I don't know, but she's definitely top 10. And speaking of Thalia, I cannot wait to see who they cast as her. I'm a little bit afraid, but at the same time, I trust them, so we'll just have to trust the process. Because I loved Tyson, so fingers crossed. Well, it's a good series. I feel like the Magnus Chase is liked a lot because Magnus's relationship with Annabeth and Percy's cameo. I feel like that is not correct.
That is not correct. Because according to the Encyclopedia of
Because Percy's cameo is literally like 3 pages long. I don't know if the Magnus Chase trilogy wasn't doing very well, because it feels like they just shoved him in there to be able to sell this book as like, Percy's in it. But I don't think that worked, at least at all with me. Honestly, you know, it did make me happy to see Percy and Annabeth interacting with Magnus, but my favorite part about Magnus Chase was Magnus Chase. And starting from book 2, it was Magnus and Alex and their dynamic. And I honestly remember really liking Sam as well. So I gotta say, even though while Annabeth is in the first and third books, I don't know if she even makes a cameo in the second one, it's not the selling point for me, and I feel like if that's the selling point for you, then you're gonna be very, very disappointed. So I'm gonna disagree with your unpopular opinion. I feel like Magnus Chase has a lot more to offer, and if you weren't there while it was being published, would you know that Percy and Annabeth show up in it, specifically Percy? I feel like you wouldn't. I feel like a lot of fans right now just vibe with Magnus because he's the best. Okay, we finally have a real, honest-to-God unpopular opinion. My unpopular opinion is that Valgrace is a better ship than Caleo. Now, for those of you who do not speak shipper, Valgrace is a ship between Leo Valdez and Jason Grace. Valgrace, because a lot of the times when you're shipping 2 guys together, you mesh their surnames instead of their names. I don't know why, it's just a thing that happens. So is Valgrace better than Caleo, Calypso, and Leo? I don't see them as very romantic, though I do see the appeal, okay? I'm not blind, I see the appeal. Best friends to lovers is a great dynamic, specifically when you have characters that are so different, like these two, and that work so well together. I see Leo and Piper as having a stronger connection than Jason and Leo. In their little triangle, that's the corner that's the least explored, even though there's so much there. I feel like Rick obviously doesn't value friendships as much as he does romantic relationships, at least in the Heroes of Olympus. So that's why we didn't see it as much. All that to say, I do see potential, and I'm gonna give that to you, because I am not a Caleo shipper, so unless it was a terrible ship, I was gonna give that to you. But you're right, that is an unpopular opinion. Or is it? Because a lot of people got really mad when I did the ranking different Percy Jackson ships video, and I forgot to add Valgrace, and there's like 100 comments being like, where's Valgrace? Where's Valgrace? I'm sorry, there were over 50 ships or so. I forgot one of them. It's not even canon. Granted, I did add a lot of them that weren't canon there, but you know, I can't be on top of everything, people. Unpopular opinion. Rick should end the Percy Jackson series because it's been going on for too long. And if he isn't gonna wrap it up in the Chalice of the Gods trilogy, he should end it on a romance book. I feel like I've seen that opinion a lot, the last part of it. Should Rick end the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles, the Rick Riordan-verse, the Percy Jackson-verse? Absolutely. Is he going to? It's a very, very interesting question. To be honest, I've been part of this fandom for over 12 years, and I'm not sure, because I was late to the fandom, and it's 12 years later, and it's still here. It's alive and thriving, and that guy is gonna die before he stops publishing books. To tell you the truth, the Chalice of the Gods trilogy is just something that he's doing to revive the nostalgia around Percy Jackson and to get people to watch the show. It's a marketing strategy that's working really well because the Chalice of the Gods, which should have been just a cash grab, was a very good book. And honestly, I found it so wholesome, and I am really looking forward to the Wrath of the Triple Goddess and whatever the third book might be, because Cozy Quest is exactly what Percy Jackson needs. However, do I think he's gonna write another one? I have a feeling that if he ever wrote another one, it would have to be a book where all the series combine, because there's been a lot of hints in the last books of each series that are like, okay, we're going to join into huge Parthenon. So I feel like if Rick does another one, it would be like a huge apocalypse with the Norse, Egyptian, Greek, and Roman gods, and I would love to see that. All the characters interacting. The problem would be, whose point of view? Who do you write it from? Who is our protagonist? Because you can't have like 10 protagonists. That's insane. I feel like Percy does not need to be the hero in another big prophecy. So if you don't choose Percy, you can't choose anyone else. So it's very, very confusing. I feel like it would have to be third person, just not choosing any specific point of view. Let me know if you think that's gonna happen, because I don't think we're gonna get a Roman book, because we already got that in the 4th Trials of Apollo. All those character arcs have been neatly wrapped up, so we would need, ideally, another new character, and I don't know if we're getting that. Maybe we'll have Estelle. She could grow up in like a Renesmee style, and then she can be our protagonist for, you know, the next end of the world. You've heard it here first. If that becomes a reality, then you should all owe me like $10. It's confusing on how Reyna spent months looking for Jason and not selecting a new praetor, but soon after Percy came, he became praetor. It's actually not confusing. I just reread The Son of Neptune, and in there she states that she really wanted to wait until the last moment possible to pick another praetor because she knew it would go to Octavian, so she was just waiting to see if Jason came back or someone worthy came to camp or showed up, because she had like a year until the Feast of Fortuna until she had to pick another one. Because she could have picked another one, but she didn't necessarily have to until the Feast of Fortuna. I'm pretty sure that was her deadline. And obviously Percy saves New Rome at the Feast of Fortuna. So they're like, okay, 2 and 1, I'm gonna pick Percy because he's obviously quite worthy of defending Camp Jupiter. That's why she selected him so quickly, because she had to. Her deadline was coming up and she knew Percy and she trusted him. So it has less to do with Percy and more to do with Reyna finally being like, okay, this is my deadline, this is my best option. And I'm so happy I reread them because I would not have been able to answer you like 2 months ago. Unpopular opinion, Will Solace is very underrated. Now, I am heavily on the side of the fandom that ships Will Solace with Nico D'Angelo, so I cannot be objective about this. I don't know what the bigger part of the fandom thinks. I feel like a lot of people do like Will Solace because honestly, he's a charming man, so what is there not to like? There's some characters that I understand could create more controversy, like Annabeth or Piper or Jason. Like those I understand being more polemic characters. Will Solace is Will Solace. Even if you don't like him with Nico D'Angelo, which why wouldn't you? Why would you dislike him as a character? He is charming, he is cute, he's a very good person. He is stubborn and such a good guy. He's like works well under pressure. He's a healer, but he will fight your ass.
私は治す方の人間なんだが。
And he has very good quotes overall. He's just so charming. He's charmed me. I'm charmed. He might be my favorite character from the Trials of Apollo, though I'm waiting for Apollo to charm me. I'm in the second book, so I'm still waiting. Unpopular opinion, but there was no need to make the Magnus Chase series. Now, to comments like this, I always say, is there really any need whatsoever to write any sort of book? There honestly isn't. I guess you're saying that it doesn't add that much, but then are you saying that you really shouldn't write the Kane Chronicles either? Are you just saying that we need the main trilogy of Percy Jackson, then Heroes of Olympus, and then Trials of Apollo? I really liked Magnus Chase when I first read it. It adds to my mental health, to my overall happiness. So I think, you know, there was a reason for writing it. It's a very inclusive series that adds a lot of interesting new characters that we've never seen before in the Riordanverse. So I'm never gonna say that it's not interesting to have in there. No? If we're talking about things that were unnecessary, I would say Trials of Apollo is the most unnecessary of them all. There was no need. You could have just written like short stories about each of the 7, and then we would have known what happened to them, and that would be fine. I'm liking it though. I'm not a hater, okay? Calm down. Sit your ass down. My unpopular opinion is that Percy and Jason are not as good friends as people keep on saying. Percy and Grover forever. Those are 2 very different things. Because I remember my opinion on this being the same as yours. Like, Percy and Jason are shown as a huge bromance in the fandom, and I was like, yeah, well, they're not as good friends. But having reread it recently, Percy's most significant relationship outside of Annabeth is surprisingly Jason. Out of the 7, which would be weird considering that he spent an extra week with Hazel and Frank. But after Son of Neptune, those 3 barely interact. And while Percy has the aquarium scenes with Frank, he has no other interaction with Hazel whatsoever. So I feel like he's completely forgotten his new family. And I don't know why Rick decided to do that, specifically because he decided to keep the trio from The Lost Hero like so closely knit together, which makes sense because they knew each other for 9 months and the other 3 knew each other for a week. But still, I find that weird. Going back to it, Jason and Percy are one of the characters that interact the most inside the 7. And when Percy and Annabeth come back from Tartarus, Jason races over and hugs Percy, and we get several moments of their relationship and how it progresses from initial bromance to then some tension between them after their fight to romance again and a deep mutual respect because they both know that they're the leaders of their respective camps and that they've had a lot of responsibility thrust upon them at a very young age. So they can relate very heavily to each other, and they can't do that with a lot of other campers. I feel like the peak of their relationship is probably at the Colosseum. Was this the Colosseum? At the end of Monk of Athena, where they're fighting side by side and they defeat the twin giants. And then you also have a cool moment in Blood of Olympus where they both jump overboard to fight, you know, the evil storm goddess. So I would say they're pretty compatible as friends. It's just quickly forgotten after Percy is not in Heroes of Olympus anymore, which is funny because in Heroes of Olympus, Percy barely thinks about Grover. He just thinks about him once when he's like, okay, there's someone in my head, like we have an empathy link, what the hell is this? Before he remembers him. And then he never thinks about Grover again, ever. And then in the Chalice of the Gods, which is canonically after Heroes of Olympus, before Trials of Apollo, so before the thing that happens to Jason happens, Percy doesn't think about Jason at all, except for this one line about being married to Piper and having grandchildren. But that's just Percy's obsession with having kids with Annabeth. Percy, you know, you should work on your relationships more, because as soon as they're not in your eye line, you like forget about them. The same thing happened with Rachel. Percy, just care about your friends even when they're not with you. Obviously, Percy and Grover are bros forever, and they're best bros. That doesn't negate that Percy and Jason are also friends, and that friendship served a very important purpose for Percy and Jason during the Heroes of Olympus. So is Percy friends with both of them? Yes. Is Grover Percy's best friend? I don't know. Ask Annabeth. I feel like Percy would always have some hair ties for people and would know how to braid hair. That is a very unpopular opinion because I do not agree with it one bit. If anyone were to have hair ties lying around and know how to braid hair, I feel like that would be Frank Sang. That's a totally Frank thing to do. And honestly, I don't think Annabeth would have trained Percy to have hair ties because I feel like Annabeth is someone who would constantly forget to have hair ties around, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't know how to braid hair and she's never tried, but then she would be good at it because she's good at weaving and it'd be like, But at the same time, it takes time, and Annabeth does not put that much effort into her appearance, and she constantly forgets to brush her hair when she's hyper focused on a project. So I don't think Percy would do this because I feel like it depends on who's trained you, what girlfriend has trained you, and I feel like Annabeth does not care about that at all. However, Frank is probably the guy to go to for a hair tie. Also, Will Solace screams hair tie boyfriend to me. Unpopular opinion. If Annabeth didn't exist, then Percy and Rachel might have worked out. I think they might have gotten together in The Last Olympian, but then they would have stopped being together in The Last Olympian, so it's really not that interesting to consider because once Rachel became the Oracle and part of the Greek world, which is what she really wanted from that relationship, then she couldn't be in that relationship. So honestly, this is a moot point. Unpopular opinion. Percy's loyalty is a weakness, not a strength. People are so strange. How are you telling me this is an unpopular opinion? This is literally canon. Percy's loyalty is from book 1, called A Fatal Flaw. It's hubris, not hummus. A fatal flaw is a character trait that gets you killed. Yes, it can be good in moderation, but in excess, it gets you killed. Therefore, a weakness, not so much a strength. Obviously, a lot of things can be great in moderation, like loyalty or pride for Annabeth, which then turns into arrogance. In excess, it can kill you. Therefore, excessive loyalty leading Percy into Tartarus, excessive pride leading Annabeth into Tartarus. Nobody's claiming it's not a weakness. It is a strength, moderation. That's a keyword here. Moderation. In excess, it will lead to Percy falling into Tartarus. In book 5 of the Percy Jackson series, it could lead to Percy like dooming the whole world, but it didn't. I don't think anyone's fighting you on this. Obviously, it's a weakness. It's his fatal flaw. Nico could beat Jason if they were in a building with a ceiling on it. That's a very specific situation. I think they probably wouldn't even need a ceiling. Let's see, how many lightning can Jason summon before he gets tired, and how many times can Nico shadow trouble before he gets tired? Because I feel like it would be a resistant match between them. You know, Jason summoning lightning and then Leo being like, boop, I'm gone, I'm out of here. But I feel like Jason can probably summon lightning from inside. I feel like he's done it before. Does it have windows? That's the question. Because it can come through a window even if there's a ceiling on there. The big 7 should have been the big 9 because Reyna and Nico deserve more credit. My opinion on this is that Percy and Annabeth should probably not have been on that quest. So if you want to make Nico and Reyna part of the official 7, then I think that would be probably a more interesting dynamic, especially between Reyna and Piper. Okay, here we have many unpopular opinions. Let's go one by one. Caleo is toxic. Calypso is constantly belittling Leo and bullying him. Plus, she's 4,000 years older than him. That's a pretty good argument. If you want to hear more about my thoughts about Calypso and Leo, I have a whole ass video about it, so check that out. To keep things short, yeah, I don't like them together. Number 2, Percabeth is toxic. Now, let me stop you right there. It isn't. Go touch some grass. Also have a whole video about that. Jason and Reyna should have been a couple. they would have been great together, and it would have made Jason's death even sadder. Maybe Reyna joins the Hunters after his death because she doesn't love anyone else. Should they have been a couple? I think they could have been a couple at Camp Have Jupiter. At Camp Jupiter before things went down in the war with Gaia. I feel like that relationship should have been a thing that happened and not just like Reyna projecting her feelings onto Jason, because that felt a little bit mean when Jason was like, oh yeah, she was nothing to me. Like, Rick, maybe they should have been something. But afterwards, no, it made sense for Jason to keep dating Piper until they weren't. Number 4, Solangelo is overrated. Not saying it's bad, just overrated. It had no development before Sun and the Star, but people still loved it purely because it was a different couple. By different, do you mean gay? Because you can say it. You can say gay. Gay is not a bad word. People liked it because it was a different couple. I mean, you're not wrong. There are some people who like it just solely because it's gay, but it has so much more to offer than that. And the fact that you're like, oh, it has no development before the Sun and the Stars, have you literally not read the Trials of Apollo? Because that's where most of their development is. And even if you read the Blood of Olympus, there's quite a bit of development there. Like, you definitely see the spark, you see the beginning of a relationship. So you're like, okay, something is definitely gonna happen between these two. Because it's even said that they knew each other from before. Will did not take any of the crap that Nico was showing his way, and Nico was like, oh, maybe this guy is worth staying at Camp Half-Blood for, you know, besides all his other motives. But you can't say that they didn't have any kind of development before the Sun and the Star, because they really, really did. Read book 1 and 5 of the Trials of Apollo plus Blood of Olympus. That's where it is, and it's not nothing. Number 6, Luke and Thalia would have been a great couple if she didn't die and wasn't evil. So Luke would be a great pair with Thalia if he was completely different from how he is in canon. That's a great opinion. The comment under this was that Thalia would still be a pine tree if Luke wasn't evil, so that wouldn't work out either. Lester is quite underrated and deserves more love. If you don't know, Lester Papadopoulos is the human equivalent of Apollo in Trials of Apollo. And a lot of people do make the distinction between Lester and Apollo because they do seem like very different characters in and out of the Trials of Apollo. I don't know if he's underrated or not because I'm not in that part of the fandom a lot, but I could kind of see him being underrated. Honestly, he is a very interesting character because he has 5 books dedicated to just his character development, and no one has ever had that in the Percy Jackson universe, so he's already special in that way. So is he underrated? I don't know. Does he deserve more love? Not when he's Apollo, but when he's Lester, I feel like it's knowing and learning that he shouldn't take people's love for granted and that he doesn't deserve to be loved by everyone. If you're talking about love from the fandom, then maybe. Unpopular opinion, Percy did not beat Ares. Ares was toying with him and was with Kronos. Kronos did not want Percy dead. Had Ares actually tried, Percy would not have been able to live at all. I feel like this isn't so much an unpopular opinion as it is canon. Percy didn't beat Ares, he just cornered him into letting him go. Percy, especially 12-year-old Percy, could never beat Ares in a sword fight, but he did get a couple of good slashes in, and he could have disfigured his face, which I don't know if it would have been permanent for a god, but definitely his connection with Kronos was something that helped him stay alive. And because apparently you guys left me 100,000 comments, this is the last one for today. Unpopular opinion, the Lost Hero is better than the Son of Neptune. I feel like that is completely subjective. There are 2 kinds of people in this world, the people who like the Son of Neptune better and the people who like the Lost Hero better. I'm pretty sure they're on the same level for me as of 2024. Before I would have always said the Lost Hero because it has Leo. And, you know, Percy, obviously, I love him even more than I love Leo, but his companions I was just not vibing with back in the day. But as of 2024, I'm pretty sure I love both of them equally, which is to say, not that much, because the Heroes of Olympus, what a mess. So with that, I will leave you until next time where we have so many more juicy unpopular opinions to go through. And you guys did not hold back, let me tell you, so look forward to that. Please leave a like if you like this video. Comment down below what unpopular opinions you agreed or disagreed with. Did you think I roasted anyone unfairly? Because, you know, I didn't. So subscribe if you haven't already and click that bell notification so you won't miss any of my upcoming videos, like part 2 of this unpopular video saga. I post videos just like this every single Friday, and I guess I'll see you guys next time. Bye!